Call the meeting, East Lyme Board of Finance to order, 7 o'clock. First item on the agenda, pledge allegiance, please all rise. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is delegations. Delegations is reserved for comments on things that are currently on the agenda. If anybody from the audience would like to talk about town business that's currently on the agenda, please come up to the podium. Great opportunity. Okay, do it. Seeing none, next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from February 14th. Have we all familiarized ourselves with the meeting minutes from February 14th? Do we have any addendums, additions, subtractions, comments?
I have a correction, I think, on the top of page 2, in reference to the food service program, the last sentence of that paragraph, this year, the food service director, they have their own food service director and I think you meant now making money? Yeah, okay.
What a difference a letter makes, huh? Okay. Any other comments on the minutes? Hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Do I have a motion to accept the meeting minutes of February 14th? I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained?
Abstain.
One abstention. 4-0-1. All right. Next item on the agenda, Attorney Freedom of Information Act and letter that was submitted. If you would, please. Please. So, just one item before you start talking about this. You start off by saying that I requested this letter. I didn't request this letter.
I'm sorry, I thought you did.
That's okay. I'm glad you wrote it. I'm glad you put your position in paper. But this was the kind of thing that I asked. If it existed, I'd like to see a copy of it. But just a point of clarity.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that understanding, if everyone has gotten a copy of the letter, I won't test the board's patience by going through it again.
Okay.
Perhaps we'll hit the highlights if it's okay. I was asked to address actually a very specific item on the agenda, which is the board comments item. And in doing that, we found the board's bylaws, and actually the board's bylaws had anticipated some of these issues, so it's good that we went through them. And one of the things we learned was how the Freedom of Information Act currently deals with the preparation of agendas. It's very, very sparse in the act itself. But the Freedom of Information Commission has had some occasions on the past to review these, and the commission and the court decisions taken together have consistently held that an agenda must fairly and sufficiently apprise the public of the business to be transacted at a meeting. Connecticut courts have addressed this issue in Plainfield ZBA case. That's where our language comes in, that a notice is proper only if it fairly and sufficiently apprises the public of the action proposed. A 2016 Superior Court case provides that what the agenda must disclose is at least some level of meaningful disclosure about the subject matter of the public agency meeting. And applying these principles to the item labeled as board comments, it's most likely that the FOIC or a court would find that an agenda item labeled simply as board comments does not fairly and sufficiently apprise the public of the items proposed to be discussed. It does not describe in any meaningful way the issues to be addressed under this item. What the board does have is bylaws, and it describes what is to be considered under public comments, board comments. And it basically discusses the thought that if something has to be addressed during that time, a board member has the right to request that an item be added to the agenda. And if that motion is passed by a 2/3 vote of those present and voting on at that time, then the item can be added to the agenda and be properly on the agenda and can be discussed at that time. And that's where your bylaws comport with the FOI on that. They agree with that. So basically, it's the basic provision is that the published agenda must alert the public to what is going to be discussed at a meeting of a public agency. We did some research. Various towns, Wilton says that, and they actually say the item new business, old business, doesn't really disclose what happens unless you itemize what you're going to do under that. And sure enough, your agenda tonight itemizes what happens under new business. And I think the heading of old business is probably only there as a convention in case someone wants to put item 1, 2, 3, 4 under that. So it's more of a standby or a placeholder in that respect. So and then there was another case in Canton, has the same thing. And the other aspect, which I did some research on, is the Freedom of Information Act is lagging behind the technological advances that we have. And people are naturally, almost naturally taking to the electronic mode of communication. And there have been several cases regarding that. And actually, the FOI is trying to get a draft declaratory decision up on that. And basically, they say it's all right to text and communicate electronically between or among members of the board, so long as it does not address the items that should be discussed at a meeting concerning board business. But if you're going back and forth and saying, what time is it going to be a meeting? Do we need a special meeting tonight? What time does the meeting start? That is more procedural, and that seems to pass muster. But the better way to do it, if we can, is to try to avoid electronic communications if possible. And here I am, I'm saying this, and I think I had to send it to the chair thinking that you had asked for that opinion. And I had to send it because by electronic means, because the time was getting short. So here I am saying that, and I did send it that way, but we didn't, that was more of an item to get in your package than it is. And of course, I'm not a member of the board, so I don't have to worry about that either. So that's the general outlook about board comments.
Thank you. And to be clear, if you hadn't published this, then we probably would have asked you to. So I'm not saying that it was a wasted effort. We appreciate the effort and clarity. I just wanted to make it clear that I hadn't asked for it. I asked if it was already published, if I could see a copy of it.
Oh,
That's
okay.
all right.
Is there any other, just one point of clarity, though. You did say procedural type of conversations could be held. Is everybody going to attend the meeting? Is everybody available for a special meeting Wednesday? That kind of procedural thing is acceptable.
Yeah, it's kind of a fine line because people tend to veer sometimes and start talking about why should we be talking about this and why should not we be talking about that? It's a close call. That's why the better course is not, is you can avoid it. But indeed, this is the age we live in, and the FOI is trying to catch up. And they're not clear on their rules. The general rule they adhere to is if a document or communication, if it were reduced to writing and on a piece of paper, would it stay in the public realm as part of the public business? Then it should not be done on the electronic system. It should be done it that way.
So in your opinion, right now, where it says board comments, if we only comment on items that are currently on the agenda, that's acceptable?
Well, if they're on the agenda, you'd probably reach those items, you discuss those items at the time that you're discussing them on the agenda. And then once you leave that, I think, I don't know how your system works, but whether you leave it, do you leave it forever? Do you go back to it at a meeting in the normal course? Probably as long as the public knows that that item is being discussed. Whether you go back and forth to it, I think you're okay there because the public has notice of the item that you're addressing.
Okay, my concern was procedurally wise. Right now, we have in our bylaws the comment in the bylaws. We can't remove it right away because the way the bylaws are structured, we have to propose it during one meeting and remove it during another meeting. So there's going to be some number of meetings before we could change it if we were going to change it. So I just wanted to make sure that it was okay that we at least talk about what's on the agenda.
Sure.
Okay, that's my only questions. Thank you.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else have- Is there any
Yeah.
other?
I have questions. So, Bill, if you didn't request this, who did?
I did.
May I ask
thought-
why?
I thought you were asking for this information. People were asking, I saw all your communication going back and forth, and it seemed like you were in desperate need of legal opinions on this matter, because there was a lot of controversy and a lot of contradiction.
I didn't
on what
ask-
was being said.
I didn't ask for any legal opinion on it. I didn't gather that the board did. As a matter of fact, I printed off the email chain that went back and forth, and I'd like this included in the record as an attachment, because, for FOI reasons, but nobody in there requested legal counsel. So that was money that, I guess, I don't know.
Okay.
It's
So-
clear now, isn't it?
No, that's what I said. I
So-
think it's something that we may have, but that's besides,
Okay.
we didn't ask.
So, I looked at some of the other commissions. Board of Ed has a board comments section in their agenda, and I printed off a section of it. There are comments made under board comments for the Board of Ed that are not included in their agenda. So I guess I'm a little confused as to why we went to all this effort to pay for legal counsel to address board comments for the Board of Finance, but I'm not aware of any study or effort underway to do the same on the Board of Ed. The board, excuse me just a minute. The Board of Selectmen also has a section in their agenda for Selectmen's response or Selectman's response. I'm unclear whether it is a time for the first Selectman to respond or for the whole board, because the word men or man is used inconsistently, but nevertheless, it's a time set aside for a response from the board. So again, I'm unclear for the board or else the first Selectman. So I'm unclear as to the reason we've gone to this effort and in fact spent money on legal counsel to address board comments only for the Board of Finance, but we haven't done it for the other boards. So that leaves me a little confused.
I'm gonna let you share that microphone, so when I can respond, I will.
Yeah, I just want to finish what I'm saying first.
Okay.
And while you're up, would you be kind enough to give that to Karen for the record? Thank you. I also printed off our bylaws, just so I could be sure of this issue, because this is an important issue. Removing board comments, in our bylaws, not 6 months ago, I believe, we undertook a substantial effort to review them, approve them by the board, and our own bylaws say the board comments agenda is intended to provide each member of the board an opportunity to address comments and opinions made during public delegations and public comments, to exercise his or her own First Amendment rights, and make known his or her opinions, to request an item be added to the agenda for the next meeting, or simply to make an announcement of general or community interest, as was done for the Board of Ed. Their minutes are here. And more often than not, we have no board comments. So again, I'm just going to say I'm very curious as to the origin of this substantial effort to have these board comments removed from our agenda. And to be honest, I feel like it is an effort to silence the board's comments, which I'm very uncomfortable with. So and I'd be grateful, Karen, for you to capture those thoughts in the minutes, because I would like them reflected. I also see in the opinion from Mr. O'Connell, on the second page, the second paragraph, in the middle it says Connecticut courts, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to repeat the whole comment because what I'm interested in underscoring is order to properly prepare and be present to express their views, and that notice is proper only if it fairly and sufficiently apprises the public of the action proposed. There is no proposed action taken under board comments. It is the time for us to have an overview of what has been discussed, where there isn't perhaps another place or something that has surfaced subsequent to where the item shows up in the agenda. There is no action taken. So I do not agree with removing them from our agenda, and I'm uncomfortable with it. I don't have anything else to say at this time on that.
I'll respond to the comments made and to correct the record that we are putting focus on all commissions in town. The Board of Police, the Police Commission, received about a 45-minute tutorial this past week on FOI regulations and conducting illegal meetings. An illegal meeting would be any two members of any commission meeting together and discussing board issues. The only the only exception to that is if they're among the same party, Democrat or Republican, and they have a caucus. So you and Camille could get together and discuss items. You and John could not, ever. It would be considered an illegal meeting. We wanted to make sure the Police Commission was up to speed on that, as they are a new commission, and we want to especially make sure the Police Commission is following the law. Jeff Newton has heard the legal opinion this evening. I'm sure he'll tighten up the agenda over at Board of Education. They run separately from the town government. I would hope that you have heard that, and his legal opinion, the legal opinion of Mr. O'Connell is available for Jeff Newton as well. Many board comments, in my opinion, and I'm not the lawyer, and I can't go back over all the minutes, nor do I care to, and nor am I sure that they were all captured on the minutes, because our minutes are not narratives. They just sum up things. But many things have been brought up that do not appear on the agenda in the past.
So to summarize, it's your expectation you're going to share this position with other boards
Mm-hmm.
so that this will be universally applied throughout the...
Lastly, 20 years ago when I joined the zoning commission, you were chair, I was told, briefed by legal opinion, that we lose our First Amendment rights as commission members. We don't get to freely speak anytime we want on any subject we want. That we're commissioners. We work on behalf of the town during our commission meetings. And yes, we do lose rights.
Well, that's your opinion, though, right? You don't have a basis for that. What our bylaws specifically say that we voted on, that is a time for our First Amendment rights. So I appreciate your opinion, but it's not back
Your bylaws might be wrong.
Okay. Moving on. John, do you have any comments?
Just one comment. I think the reason we had Mr. O'Connell here was there was some confusion. They wanted some clarity on what the comments on the board at the end of the Board of Finance meeting was. Some people were uncomfortable removing it. It's fine. But I think we just want to clarify, according to FOI and the bylaws, what they should be. The other thing is, just as a side note, I went online and I went to several towns around us to the Board of Finance agendas. None of the boards have board comments at the end of their agenda. We're the only one.
Okay. So right now, there's no motion in front of us to discuss removing the comments from the agenda.
Correct.
So just to be clear, the questions we have for the town attorney, if there's any other questions about his positions.
I just have a general question. What is your, Mr. O'Connell, what's your recommendation as to how we proceed at this point? Because we can suspend, I think that's in Article 9 of the bylaws, we can suspend this provision if we so choose, or then we can amend it. So what is your, at this point, going forward?
I would suggest that you put on the agenda for the next meeting, you will consider modifying the bylaws in such a way that the board comments are described in the manner that it currently describes it, that a board member's comment can be added to the agenda by a 2/3 vote of the board.
Just generally, I enjoyed reading the opinion. I thought it was well-written, and I thought you hit the mark on Freedom of Information Act.
Well, you can speak at my testimonial.
I thought it was good. I also think, too, that there's a whole section of, we'll say, precedents as far as Robert's rules, having meetings be efficiently run. So that, to me, is a whole nother topic that really wasn't necessarily addressed in your opinion, but that seems to support your viewpoint that we stick to an agenda and that we address agenda items. We don't digress. So I agree generally. But I have just a second question, which is, if we want to sort of vent at times, what's your recommendation for the best way to do that, where we're not doing a 2/3 vote and adding an agenda item, or feeling that we're making the meeting go long at the end because we're, giving our opinions on things? What is the safest, most legal, best way to do that?
That's a tough one. I mean, venting about what? I mean, if you have a subject matter in front of you, you have an option
So-
at that time, an opportunity at that time.
Right, I understand, and that,
Yeah.
I think we all agree that we have opportunity per agenda item. We have discussion period of time before the vote is finally taken. We have that second bite of the apple. So my question is, but sometimes, in my mind, it may be good to figure out how can we do this effectively, because it will avoid the conversations in the parking lot later that may be illegal meetings later. So,
hear that.
well, I'm just saying, this is just something that can happen.
I know what you mean.
So where is there I've heard everything from retreats to do whatever, but is there a way to express opinion about upcoming issues that don't necessarily involve conducting business on a point that we could, that may be something we need to ponder?
Well, if the subject matter you want to vent on is not among the in the jurisdiction of the Board of Finance, you wouldn't be talking about board business, something under the authority of the board. So I suppose if your fellow members wanted to listen to someone talking about something which is not an item of board business, which is technically irrelevant, you can do it that way. But I'm sorry, really, the Freedom of Information Act doesn't leave much room for venting.
No,
Well,
I see that. Yeah, go ahead,
Can I
go ahead.
provide an example of what you may be talking about? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes during public comments, we hear statements that are absolutely false. So when would we have a chance to, rebut that
Correct.
particular comment?
By a 2/3 vote of the members, you can add it to the agenda.
Mr. O'Connell, as you know, that Selectmen's response on the Board of Selectmen, which has been brought up, and I believe it originally is Selectmen's response in women,
Correct.
so all could respond. if there is someone at public delegation, either the front, at the beginning or the end of the meeting, who gets up, and we have that a lot at Board of Selectmen, and they give false information, and we get that a lot at Selectmen's, that we can correct the record. That we go back on and said, we did have a comment from the public that did mention that the tower up at the cell phone tower is 200 feet up in the air. Well, it's only 100. Let the record show it doesn't need red lights blinking. It's only 100 feet. And we do that. We don't go deep. We don't take votes. We don't change the agenda. We usually never add to the agenda at selectman level, but we do make that correction. So that's why we don't have board comments. We have selectmen's response. We only speak to delegation items that need to be corrected, not to expand on them either, just to be corrected. Hope that helps.
Well, so that's what you're asking, right?
Yes.
Where would we have a
Right,
place to do
where
that?
would we do that?
That's where you should do it.
Well, if you're suggesting that we remove that from our agenda, then we would have to have a 2/3 vote to put it back on, just to address
night?
a statement that was false.
I think
So I don't want to belabor this issue. I think you understand my point, but if you could indulge me, I have a few questions for Mr. O'Connell and a few statements. If Ann is done.
Yeah, just generally, I think the board comments section is just very broad and very kind of a catch-all, and maybe that's where we just need to rein it in and, address delegations, which address agenda items or things like that, correcting record, or future items on the agenda, that type of thing. But that may be where we need to head. So, that's all I have to say.
Well, I am very interested, because this is a Board of Finance, in understanding that your opinion did not exist prior to this letter. So you were actually researching case studies and documenting that as a result of whatever communication you had with Mr. Weber.
No, I had advised the first selectman in the past when he asked me that, but I did it orally. I didn't write anything
Okay.
down. I did it orally because
Okay.
it's, to me,
Understood.
it's such a clear
Okay.
and
So,
obvious issue that
So
I
would you
didn't have to
mind
write it
sharing
down.
with this board, because we are the finance board, how many hours you spent on documenting this? What our bill is going to be for your being present here
I
this
wrote
evening?
down my time, and I'm going to put my bill in for next month, so
Right,
my
can
time
you-
will be set forth on the bill.
Can you give us a ballpark?
Oh, somewhere between 5 and 10 hours.
5 and 10 hours at a couple $100 an hour?
Yeah.
So,
Not that much. No, I don't charge that much. But between 5 and 10 hours at the municipal rate, which is $150 an hour.
Okay, still, a substantial amount of money to document something that maybe could have been addressed by this board in a different manner. I went back and I looked at the board comments last year and saw that there was only, out of the 12 regularly scheduled meetings, board members only spoke 5 out of those 12 meetings. So I'm really not sure what the issue is. And just to clarify for the record, that in the email that was given for the record, Mr. Weber suggested that the constraint for removing the board comments came from the town attorney. So when I saw that, I said, okay, Bill, would you mind providing me with a copy of his opinion? Right? So then Bill says, if the board consensus is to remove the comment section from the bylaws, we will. If the consensus is to leave it and the attorney's position is not currently in the form of a formal legal opinion, then we will need to spend the town's money to get one created and then take appropriate action. So, for the final time, who asked you to produce this letter?
I think Mr. Nixon said that he asked me to look into this and write an opinion.
Okay. So the first issue I have is that this is a Board of Finance meeting, and we wrote our bylaws and approved them because we run our own meetings. And number 2, if it is true that Mr. Weber asked for this to be produced, his purchasing authority, according to our bylaws, is $300. So you were not within your right to ask for this work to be done.
Good thing I didn't do it then,
It's a good thing. Except
Well,
you did represent,
because I'm cheap, and that's why I put in that note, I don't want to spend the money if we don't have to. And that's why my comment in there was, if the board feels that they need a legal recommendation, we'll talk about it, but right now, I didn't want to spend the money. So
but this board, you did not give this board a chance to say whether we thought that we needed to spend money to do it. You made a unilateral decision
Nope.
based on your discussion with Mr. Nickerson,
Nope.
and you acted independently.
Nope.
Then what other board member gave you their consensus in terms of getting this
Again,
work done?
I didn't ask for this work to be done. I asked the first selectman if I could have a copy of it. My email,
You asked for, is it in writing?
yes.
No, what I said was because the representation was made to me that this opinion came from the attorney, I specifically
Did.
said, Bill, please provide a copy of the opinion from the town attorney to all board members.
And when I read that, it seemed to me that you were looking for a
Because
written
I thought
copy.
because I thought it existed. It was
I got a legal opinion orally, and it looks like you wanted it in writing. I provided this board the legal opinion in writing so you could perform your, wait a minute, so you could perform your meetings legally, which, if you apply what you do, if it was only 5 times last year, doesn't mean 5 times you did it right. It means just one of those times you may have done it wrong.
Right, so
Okay,
a
so-
civil conversation could have
So,
prevented
I'm not
us
sure that's capable.
could have prevented us from spending over $1,000 to produce an opinion that this board may or may not. And Mr. O'Connell, I respect your opinion. I do. I don't happen to agree with it, but I do respect your opinion and I value it. I just don't happen to agree with it. So I rest my case. Either Mr. Weber sanctioned this opinion to be documented or he didn't. Either way, it doesn't sit well with me. If you are requesting this to be done for the Board of Finance,
And for the
the
police
Board of
commission.
Finance is an independent board.
No, it is not.
And you cannot
No, it is not.
meet with the chairman to suggest that he do something without the rest of
It's
us.
a town commission that doesn't have a legal budget, that you were struggling legally with a legal issue, and I wanted to make sure you clearly
Can you
had the legal
please-
opinion
then
from town
please-
attorney.
Then please, Mark, give me an example of when we illegally.
I'm not going to go over that. And by the way, you're getting a presentation. It should be subject to question and answers from the lawyer right now. We shouldn't be debating this.
You're right. You're
It's
absolutely
not
right.
on the agenda.
Okay.
Very
So Jason,
good.
do you have any comments?
Unfortunately, I came in a little late. I wish I was able to hear the first 10 minutes. I do know, and maybe it is illegal. There are items that seem to get discussed, and there's going to be an action that will happen. And sometimes we like to see the loop closed by asking that question in the board comments. And I think when you do take away that board comments, and if it's illegal, it needs to be taken away. That we do. Eliminate that chance to ask that question. Whatever happened with X did that come to fruition? Where is this? Where is that? Without having an agenda with 15 different items on them.
So to be clear,
Yeah.
the agenda item right now is to
Right.
talk about this letter, right? In the
Right.
future, we will put an agenda item on here to talk about this paragraph. And if it means that we have to change the wording a little bit, to change it to feedback, rebuttal instead of comment,
Right.
we can deal with it then.
Right.
Right now, the agenda item is talking about this letter.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So any
So
questions about the
I
letter?
do not have any questions. I'd never received a copy of it. Do you mind? Do you have an extra copy? Because I walked in late. I apologize.
Yeah, it was in the
Thank you.
email.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I read it, but didn't print it out. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Attorney O'Connell? Hearing none? Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell.
Okay, that was fun. New business. And one thing that the board members may notice is that the agenda has been trying to change it so that town staff can come and present their information early in the procedure, early in the agenda, and not stay till the wee hours and talk about their issues. And then we can keep the Board of Ed, Board of Selectmen, and Director of Finance late. Just
all
more fun. All right. Transfer additional dispatcher, 11,828. Let me see which one this is. These aren't numbered. Oh, here's A. Okay, 6A.
We are very busy at the dispatch center, so much so that we are overwhelmed and calls aren't, calls are being answered sometimes, but in a manner that we'd like it to be more timely. Sometimes when we get overwhelmed, we have a mutual aid agreement with other towns, and the calls get bounced. The bottom line is, we need a 5th dispatcher. It's in my budget that you'll receive tonight. It's in my budget for next year, but we want to start that as early as possible. So we want to we have a part-time on now. Right now, we have 4.5 dispatchers, 4 full-time and a half dispatcher. We want to make that part-time a full-time dispatcher. Recently, we had the resignation, or the retirement, thank you, of Dick Morris, who retired March 1st. We have some additional funding from his salary line that we could apply to this. Is that where it's going to come from, in contingency? From the salary line? Right. So we've made some moves.